Hi everyone, it's Colleen and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm participating in an Altenew Educator Blog Hop, and the theme for this hop is to use something old or something new from our Altenew stash. Today I'm going to show you how to build a wreath using layered stamps. We're going to be using two older stamps of mine and a new set of inks. So let's get started. So we're going to use two stamp sets today. And the first one is called Wild Ferns. This is the layering stamp set that we're going to be using to build our wreath. I got this a while ago and I just haven't really used it much except behind flowers. And I really want to use these as a focal point. Here's a layering guide that Altenew offers for their layered stamps, and that just shows you how to layer them. And it's a really helpful tool, especially if you're new to layered stamps. The other stamps that we're going to use is called the Mandala Maker. And this is a really cool set because you can create a mandala, but you can also use your other stamps like flowers or even word sentiments and create a wreath. And that's what we're going to use today to create our wreath using this size circle. Also, we're going to be using a new set of Altenew inks called Nature's Wonders. And I thought that these colors would be perfect for those tropical leaves. The colors are Misty Moor, Marshland, Sea Forest, and Mangrove Root. And I will make sure to provide all this information in the description box below. But aren't those gorgeous? Let's get started building our wreath. So the first step is to create the base, which is where that mandala maker comes in. And I'm going to grab that circle that I referred to earlier, and I'm going to set up my base. And then I'm going to stamp it using the lightest color of those inks, which is called Misty Moor. Now you're going to see a boo-boo that I made here. I stamped it too hard and I got ink in the middle of the circle. So lesson to myself, stamp that very, very, very lightly so you don't get ink where you don't want it. Now the nice thing about this is that there are little circles or little tiny circles within the big circle, and that's what I'm going to use to line up my leaves. So now I'm ready to start with the first layer. Now these leaves, each leaf has 3 layers, and I'm taking one leaf and starting with the first layer. Again, refer to that layering guide as a helpful tool. And I'm grabbing my lightest ink color called Misty Moor. So when you're layering, you start with your lightest color and then you build with darker color from there. Now I'm just going to go around the whole wreath with my first layer because it's just easier for me than to be swapping back and forth with layers. So I'm going to do each layer at one time. And again, grabbing my lightest ink, Misty Moor, and stamping that. And I'm going to do that one more time before I go to my next layer. And lining it up in those little tiny dots. It's very helpful. That Mandala Maker is a really cool tool. I'm really glad I chose to work with it today. Now it's time to go to layer 2. And when I'm doing layer 2, I'm going to grab the next darkest color ink. And I'm just lining it up according to the layering guide. That tool is really helpful to help you line up your layers. And I'm going in with my second darkest color, which is called Marshland. And already you can see how those leaves are starting to form personality and depth. Now I'm going to do this 2 more times before I go in with my third layer. And you can see that I'm taking some time to make sure this is lined up. But the nice thing about this stamp set, Wild Ferns, is that even if you get it off a little bit and you're not completely, the layering isn't completely right, these are the perfect layered stamps to play with because you won't notice any small errors in there. So I suggest that you play with a stamp set like this if you're new to stamp layering. So again, I'm referring to that layering guide because I want you to see how important it is to use that guide if you're new to stamp layering. And also, I'm going to show you that Altenew numbers the stamps so that you know what grouping you're working with and you won't grab the wrong stamp set. I think that's such a wonderful educational tool that Altenew offers everybody. Now I'm going in with my third layer, and I'm using my third darkest color, which is called Sea Forest. And I'm wiping it off in between with my microfiber cloth so I don't get ink where I don't want it. So you can see here that I finished this on the side, and I've got all my layers on there. And now I'm going to be using some embossing powder called Royal Emerald because I wanted to add some shine. So I am taking one of my layers, and I'm going to use my embossing pad, my sticky embossing pad, and rather than adding ink, I'm going to add embossing powder. And that's a cool thing I wanted you to see is you don't have to just use inks to layer. You can use embossing powder and add some really gorgeous shine that really helps your cards to just pop right off the page. And again, I clean in between using them so I don't get ink and embossing powder where I don't want it. And I'm going back in and doing the same thing on the other side of the wreath. And I will continue to build this up until I'm happy with how it looks. And I always use a piece of copy paper to drop my embossing powder in, and then I put it back into the container. So that's what you see there. Now I'm going to get ready to heat dry this. And I wanted to show you how that looks because if you're not familiar with embossing, I want you to see what the embossing powder looks like when it's fully dried. It gets shiny, and that's how you know your embossing powder is dry. So I'm just heating that up now, and then I will end up finishing with a little bit more embossing, and I will do that on the side so that you don't need to watch the entire process. So now you've seen that I have done all the embossing, all the stamping, it's all done. And now I'm going to work on my sentiment. This is my all-time favorite Altenew sentiment, the Hello sentiment. It is just the perfect size, the perfect calligraphy. I love it. So I'm going to stamp this a few times, and I started to do it with a white cardstock, and then I decided to go with the Altenew mirrored black cardstock. I love this cardstock for sentiments like this because it's shiny and it really pops off the page. Now I'm doing, I die cut this twice because I'm going to layer one over the other to give it a little bit of lift off the page. And I use a liquid glue to do this because it gives me a little bit of wiggle room to line up the two sentiments before that glue dries. Because it does take a little bit of effort to make sure everything is all lined up, so it looks like one sentiment. Now, when that's done, I'm just going to set it aside, put something heavy on it, and let it dry. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to work on my card panel. I'm cutting it down to 5 1/4 by 4 in size because I'm going to be putting this on a black card base because I thought the black card base would really complement that black hello sentiment. So once it's done, now I'm ready to prep my A2 sized card base and glue my card panel onto it. So the awesome thing about this is that this is a 1-layer card, but because of layered stamps, it looks like it's got a lot of depth to it, doesn't it? But it's really easy to mail these in the mail because it's such a thin card, unlike those bulky cards. So now I'm ready to do my sentiment because I've got my card base set, and all that's required is to glue my sentiment on, and then I will finish with some embellishments. Now the cool thing about this wreath is that you could use this for all 4 seasons. I want this to have a bit of a springy, summery look, so I am going in with Nuvo drops, and I'm adding them in English mustard, so they're like little yellow berries. But, say during the holiday, you could do little red berries. So this is an all-season thing. And that's it to my card. I really hope that you got some inspiration here and that you will grab your Altenew tools and your Altenew stamps and start creating something new for yourself. If you like my YouTube video, please hit the subscribe button and the like button. Thanks!